Jason Reid. I live here, as I say, just north of Belfast in Northern Ireland. Just me and my dog. I've got a whippet called Comet. The first time I ran a sub-4 marathon was in Berlin. I run because I love it. It's a love, it's a passion. I will say the social life took a hit because you realise how little fun it is to go out with your friends all having a drink and you're not. That I'd actually done something that I didn't think I could ever do. I'd lost about 2 stone of weight as well. I'd looked better than I'd looked in my entire adult life. I felt better than I ever looked or I felt in my life. And for me, that was kind of the spark. I have a running YouTube channel where I just take people around a lot of the sort of local races we do in Northern Ireland. But for me, one of the motivating things I found was people who were running about the same time as me, who were at the front of the pack, and you're watching people thinking, oh, I can do that. If they can do that, I can do that. The realization of how important running is for my own mental health. The pandemic, I lived alone, and so that there was proper isolation, prescribed antidepressants by my GP about running being like an antidepressant, but I found it really is.
Hey listeners, if you are enjoying the stories, please leave a comment, share, or subscribe to this channel for 2 reasons. First, you'll get notified when I publish the next story. Second, it inspires me to get you more stories. I'm your host, Kamal Dada. Enjoy the story. Jason, welcome to Berlin 26.2 podcast. I'm really excited to have you here and learn about your running journey. Welcome.
Thank you, Kamal. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Great. So let's start a little bit about your background then.
So I'm Jason Reid from Northern Ireland. So I live in Northern Ireland here, where it's cold and dark at the moment, but it's got its plus points too. I just can't think of too many at the moment. So so I started running for about 14, 15 years ago. For me now, it's one of those things that is just part of life. Gels alongside my sort of professional life. I'm a project manager working IT here in the NHS in the health service in Northern Ireland. So that's what I do by day, and then by night, obviously running whatever I can get done that way. So I live here, as I say, just north of Belfast in Northern Ireland. Just me and my dog. I've got a whippet called Comet. So she's the other one. She occasionally runs with me, but when I say runs, I run. She kind of walks because it's just walking pace for her. I hold her back. But so that's kind of in a nutshell where I'm at the moment.
Great. So you have a running buddy at home. That's great to have. That's awesome. So you wrapped up Berlin, and that was your, I think, based on our chat conversation before our this call, this is your 6th Berlin Marathon. How was the experience? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so for me, it was my 6th Berlin Marathon, as you say. I think 16th marathon overall. For me, Berlin was the very first major I ever done back in 2013, so 10 years ago to the year of doing this one. And I don't know, from that very first moment doing Berlin, previous to that, I'd done Belfast marathons here in my home city, and that's fine, and that's kind of how I get into it, and we'll maybe cover that later on. But for me, Berlin, getting that major marathon, the big city marathon, the organisation, the scale of it as well, having 40,000 people, and just the course, the support. I mean, just everything for me blended very well together. For me as well, because it's relatively close to home. So obviously there's Boston and places like this that take maybe 6 or 7 hours to fly to. Whereas for Berlin, it's a less than 2 hour flight. It's quite similar culturally as well from where I live, and so there's no time, 1 hour time difference. It's quite easy to get used to. So very comfortable in Berlin. It's a lovely city to begin with. It's quite an affordable city, very friendly city. I find even the locals and the people there, and for me that was a big thing. So this year for me, I just try and run Berlin every year I can, because it's just, there's something about the race I feel it's quite special. There's nothing for me like turning that corner, the last corner for Unter den Linden, to see the Brandenburg Gate. That feeling is just impossible to replicate, and the support is just like a wall of sound basically then, and it feels like they're all there for you. I think, you know what I mean? And it's it's a fantastic feeling. The organisation is second to none. The volunteers, we get volunteers at races that are maybe doing the job, but in Berlin, it feels like they're having a great day out as well. They're really enjoying themselves there, so the passion's there. So for me, yeah, it's getting Berlin in the calendar every year is so important for me. It's a highlight of the year in any race distance. That's certainly how I kind of feel.
That's great. And are you chasing the 6 majors as well?
For me, it hasn't been a goal of mine. It's been a goal of my friends. My friends actually only got Tokyo to go, and I actually went with him to Boston this year to watch him. For me, I've done London, I've done Berlin, and it crossed my mind. I thought, well, there's two. I both of them done by 2014. Why not go for the rest of them? But there's just something kept me coming back to Berlin, and it may happen by an accident, by a happy accident. I would like to do New York one year, but for me, the sort of the 6 marathon majors isn't the current goal. I actually have started to take part in the Super Half series. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
Yes.
Half marathons, yeah. So it's one that's slightly more local if you're obviously from Europe, and so this year I ran Lisbon half marathon in March, and Copenhagen half marathon, which was actually 1 week before Berlin this year. So I ran that this year as well. And again, there's 5, now 6 in that, because Berlin half got added to that actually only last week. So that's my kind of challenge, is to get the Super Half series done, and then just concentrate on getting back to Berlin every year, because as I say, that for me is the highlight, the pinnacle of marathon running.
Oh, that's great. So what keeps you come back to Berlin? Because you're saying that somehow differently, you highlighted a couple of aspects of the run that you love, the city, the people, the cheers, that differently. But what keeps bringing Jason back 6 times and beyond?
For me, it's those sort of irreplaceable memories. So the first time I ran a sub-4 marathon was in Berlin. It was in the streets of Berlin. I'd searched for a sub-4 marathon. It was my 9th attempt at the marathon. I got it in 2015. And that was in Berlin, and just everything seemed to go right. The weather as well, I don't know what you've experienced, but for me, I've been to Berlin 6 times for a marathon, and every single time it's been nice weather. It's been sunny, it's been mild without being maybe too warm. Some years been quite warm, but I've never had like a washout or a really miserable day or weekend. So that as well. Obviously the course is quite flat, which is always good for good times. And as well, you always have that buzz of something special about to happen, because every year you go there, there's someone there attempting a world record. So obviously this year it was the women's world record. You went in 2013 when I first ran Berlin. Wilson Kipsang ran the then world record. Daniel Kimetto the year after, and then of course Eliud Kipchoge, as we know, in 2018, 2022. So to be running the same course at the same time, albeit quite a bit slower than these guys who are setting world records, literally following in their footsteps, his and her, and obviously the female world record this year. For me, I think that's what keeps me coming back. It feels special. It feels special as a marathon, and that's, yes, fast times does a lot of that, but the people, I really do think the people there are so supportive, or so energetic as well. And yeah, for me, that is why another reason why I just keep coming back to Berlin.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's great to know. Now let's go back a little bit, because you said you ran quite a few marathons, and I'm trying to recollect the exact number you said. How did it all started for Jason? Like, how did you get into long distance running?
Yeah, so for me, there's a couple of motivating factors. I was in my early 20s, went to university, wasn't really doing an awful lot. I would play the odd bit of football. And for me, distance running was the last thing on my mind, quite honestly, at that age. It was all about going out for a few drinks and meeting up with friends, watching football and bits like that. To the extent that when I was in high school here, I actually got in trouble because we were doing cross country one day and we took a shortcut through someone's back garden out where school was. So that's the extent to which I would go to get out of distance running. But in the Belfast Marathon, my home marathon here, we have an event, the relay marathon. So it's a relay of up to 5 team members, and it breaks the marathon down into sort of 4 or 5 mile chunks for each of the guys to do. And a friend of mine was actually running the full marathon for the first time, his first full, and the rest of us thought we'll support him by doing the relay sort of at the same time. So we all took like a 4 or 5 mile section, and mine was the final 5 miles of the marathon. So we changed over 21 miles. I took the baton, or the wristband as it was, and carried on to the finish. And for me, even to get to that, took a lot of training. I think I might have walked a bit in that. And then when I was coming up the finish straight in Belfast at the end of my 5 mile relay section, feeling like I was going to be sick, like I had to lie down, there was full marathon runners coming past me looking better. And that was kind of what got me to think, I wonder if I could do that someday. This is back in 2009. I wonder if I could do that someday, because they've run 26 miles and they look better than me, and they're maybe twice my age. So again, I was obviously not in great physical shape either, as a result of the lifestyle of just eating fast food, drinking a lot of alcohol and that. So in 2010, then I decided to enter Belfast Marathon, and bought a pair of running shoes, proper running shoes. Got a plan from the internet. I think it was Hal Higdon, one of those very, basic beginner marathon plans, just get over the line, 18 weeks. And so for me, it was kind of a lifestyle thing as well, because a lot of things culminated at once. I had started a placement year. So in university, we had a placement year, a professional placement year spent in the workplace. And my sort of propensity to go out with friends during the week, even a few drinks, and maybe be a bit hungover the next day, wasn't working too well on work. I was putting a lot of weight on. It wasn't very becoming. So I took the decision sort of just around that Christmas time, when everyone was overboard with eating and drinking. I kind of thought,
right,
how about this is just the end of it all for a while. So our Belfast Marathon's in May of each year. So from January the 1st, it was the New Year resolution. It was, here's the training plan, no more junk food and no alcohol for the next 4 months at all. And I will say the social life took a hit, because you realize how little fun it is to go out with your friends all having a drink and you're not. So that took a hit. But then when you were having to get up on a Sunday morning for a long run anyway, you didn't really want to. So for me, that was the big thing, was to say, it started off for me as I want to do a marathon. I want to do a marathon this year, do it once, bucket list, tick it off, and then forget about it. So I trained that year, completed pretty much all of that training, didn't get injured actually, stuck fairly religiously to it, done that first marathon, and there was just something at the end of that marathon. It was extremely hard. It was a shade under 5 hours, and I had no idea what time to expect. But when I looked at how I felt after it, the achievement I felt that I'd actually done something that I didn't think I could ever do. I'd lost about 2 stone of weight as well. I'd looked better than I looked in my entire adult life. I felt better than I ever looked or I felt in my life. And for me, that was kind of the spark that started it. I then ran the same marathon the next year, done the same thing basically. I started training again in January, gave up drinking, done it again, I think a bit faster, maybe 4:45, I think it was that year. And then the year after, I finished university, I started a job, and the motivation just wasn't quite there. So I didn't do the marathon that year. I wasn't really running much. I was doing a lot more career focused stuff. And that was kind of when I thought to myself, okay, I've done 2 marathons now. Do I stop? Is that me done? Or do I like running? Do I love running for running's sake? And so I joined a local running club here in Belfast, North Belfast Harriers. And I've just gone from there. Really, I sort of started to do more distances then. So half marathon, 5Ks, races like that. And they got me into a way of enjoying running for running's sake. So not just for training, not just, here's a training plan, you have to do this, you have to do this, but more of a running's an everyday thing. It should just slide into your life naturally as anything. It should be as natural as putting your socks on in the morning. And that's what I got from the running club. I learned how to run slow as well, because in the past it was always going out hitting these paces, hitting these sessions, whereas they said you have to learn to run slow. You have to learn to run every day, and not run one day and you're wrecked for 2 or 3 days, you can't do anything. So I learned an awful lot, and I think there's a lot to be said for training with a club, training with a proper coach as well. And so over the years then, as I say, I've 16 total marathons done now, but my time came down, as I say, from that initial I think it was 4:57, 4:45, and then with the club under 4 hours. The best I ran was 3:51 in Berlin in 2018. Awesome. So for me, it's been the club, and I suppose the friends and connections you make from running as well, people that share the passion you share. For me, it was just finding something that I love to do, that that I wanted to do. I think that once you get out of that mindset of this is training, this is work, once you go out the door and just unplug from everything, we're in such a connected world where there's always a computer, a phone, a TV, a laptop around you. There's
Right.
always connection. So for me, I would always go out. I never ran with music or with podcasts or anything like that. I was just ran natural and just sort of helped clear the thoughts as well. So yeah, for me, that sort of sparked a love of running for running's sake, as opposed to marathon, tick box, stuff like that. I actually started just enjoying the active running. So if I had no events to do, back when I did my first marathon or second marathon, I just didn't train. I just didn't run. There was no point. Whereas as the years went on, once I joined the running club, I like to run. It doesn't matter if I'm, got an event coming up or whatever. And again, for me as well, the physical side of it in terms of body weight, in terms of being in shape, was another and continues to be a factor, but I think a smaller one than ever before, because there's just so many other additional benefits to running that you just don't get from simple, looking in the mirror or weighing yourself. So I think that's for me, that's kind of where I've started with running, and sort of that's where I still am now. It's just I love the active running. I love even the ability. For me, it's when we all start running and you think a mile is a mile, it's a long way, it's tough. But you look at distances that you would get in your car to drive, 15, 18 miles, and even the ability to cover that on foot, to run that distance is still a novelty to me to have it. I live about 7 or 8 miles outside of Belfast and outside our capital, and I would always drive in to the office, into work. But if I'm training, I'll run in and out.
Oh, you do?
As a long run, so it's that novelty of sort of, I never thought that was something I could ever do, something I could ever achieve. And when you're doing it in training, and then you consider the distance you run in a marathon, it's I think a lot of it as well, it still amazes me what I'm actually capable of, because at that young age, when we were doing the relay marathon, even the first marathon, it was a struggle to get round the course. There was walk breaks, there was stuff like that. Whereas now, to be able to actually cover that distance confidently, running the whole distance, even aiming for certain times, for me, it's just finding out bits about yourself that you're capable of more than what you thought and more than what you were yesterday. And I think that's always a big thing for everyone training, is sort of the improvements. And I find this over the years isn't always linear. You're not always going to go straight up. There's peaks and troughs. But the aim is always just to be that little bit, do something a little bit better than the day before, whether it's strength work, whether it's, it's an easy run, just more miles in the legs, a bit more strength in the legs. It doesn't always have to be you're getting faster every single week. It's gradual. It's building blocks, building this sort of foundation. So for me, I think one of the biggest takeaways is just joining a running club. People who can teach you, be open to being taught as well, open to learning from coaches, open to learning from your peers, people who have been doing this a long time, people around your ability, people who can say, show you where you're going wrong, what you could do differently. Because that was a massive thing as well. People in the club generally take interest in you, in your journey, in what you're doing, offer each other advice. People have been there before. And I'm talking, that's 13 years since my first marathon. I hope I can do that now. I hope I can be the person that can offer a little bit of advice and say, I've been there, here's maybe what I do differently, here's what I done wrong. So I think hopefully that's where I've come to today, all being well.
That's great. I mean, that's an incredible story of like how you made running part of your lifestyle, right? And it says, there is a saying, right? If you are changing a habit, you have to replace with something, otherwise you'll go back to the old habits. And looks like differently you are able to do that very successfully and sustain that change of habits, making running a lifestyle for you. And then running club is different. A lot of folks contributed their journey to their coaches, their running clubs they're part of. It's another way you have built an accountability team for you. Like you are accountable to the running team. They're also helping you. So you build the mutual accountability factor.
100%.
Playing dividends to you and to them too. And then you're ready to pass the button to someone help you and to someone else if you can help out. It's wonderfully put together, Jason. So what's next for Jason? I know you're chasing more goals, more Berlins. What's next for Jason?
Yeah, so for me, I've a few things on the horizon that keep me going. Again, one of the biggest things is externally is trying to get a few people to experience what I'm experiencing with the sport. So to get into running, to love running. I've got a couple of friends, Paul, who's gotten into park run, who's building up big distances, who never ran before. My partner, my girlfriend actually has just started. She done her first park run in Copenhagen, and she's now getting into it and has joined a running club. That's a big thing as well. To influence people around you in a positive way. From doing what I've been doing. Berlin for me, the goal. I have a friend who has done 17 Berlin marathons, so I know about the famed Jubilee Club where you do 10 Berlin marathons, and then you get a special number for your back. You get guaranteed entry every year. At the expo, you get the wee secret room with all the nice goodies and stuff. So for me, 10 Berlin marathons is the ultimate aim, and that's what keeps me going as well. Back to Berlin. I do also want to challenge myself over different terrain. There's a marathon in Switzerland, Jungfrau Marathon, up Jungfrau Joch.
It's one of the toughest ones. Yep.
One of the toughest ones. Yeah. So for me, that's a goal someday to get onto the trails, because as I say, I can hopefully offer a little bit of advice over road marathons and some other distances. But it's like when I start to think about trail runs and ultra runs, it's like I'm starting again. You get that excitement of, I have no idea what I'm doing here. I have no idea where to start. And so that excites me to jump into that world of trail running, of sort of being on your feet for hours and not being so much about pace and just being on your feet for time and distance. So I think that's another big goal. And as well, I think one of the things that started me back running, I had an injury for a year or two during the pandemic. I didn't get out much for about 18 months. And again, I look back at what I achieved in the past with running, which is what I would call decent for me times. Say 3:51 the marathon is just unbelievable for me now. I ran Berlin 2 or 3 weeks ago in 4:44, I think it was. So nowhere near that, but I'm not too worried. And when I thought about getting back into running and thought, I'm not sure I can get back to those times when I was in my sort of mid-20s, I had to have another motivator, another goal. And for me, that was starting my YouTube channel. I have a running YouTube channel where I just take people around a lot of the sort of local races we do in Northern Ireland to show what there is in Northern Ireland, to follow along for different races, say in Copenhagen, Lisbon, Berlin. I was in Boston earlier in the year with my friend watching that race, just to sort of share that experience with people. And I think you see a lot of YouTube channels of really elite runners.
Right.
And I love watching them, really top runners, 220 marathon runners.
Yeah.
Really great advice. But for me, one of the motivating things I found was people who were running about the same time as me, who were at the front of the pack. And you're watching people thinking, oh, I can do that. If they can do that, I can do that. And I want to do that. I want to be that person. Someone watches on YouTube and thinks, well, if he can do that and it looks like a great deal of fun, maybe I can do it too. And it makes it more accessible. So for me, sharing experiences like that, I enjoy that side of it as well. It's a passion of mine, videography, cinematography, video editing, stuff like that. So I want to continue along that, sharing sort of my journey. Because for me now, I run because I love it. It's a love, it's a passion. It's not something that I'm going to win races or win medals necessarily. Although I think, if I'm being honest with myself and with you, I probably still have that in the back of my head thinking, I wonder if I could get down one day, back down under 4 hours again in the marathon. And if I could do that before my 10th Berlin Marathon, I'll be over the moon. So yeah, for me, it's kind of, more of the same in terms of Berlin Marathon. Get to that number 10, get the times down again. I say those super halves as well. I want to finish the series of the super half marathons. So that leaves Valencia, Cardiff, and Berlin, I think, are the outstanding ones. I've got Prague next April then, and move to the trail a little bit then, see if we can get some trail races, because that Jungfrau one is the pinnacle, is the ultimate, and that's not going to happen anytime too soon because it's a marathon distance up a trail. But can I run a trail half marathon? Can I run a mountain half marathon? Can I then move to that, because it looks like a whole different world, a whole different set of considerations. We go on a marathon, as in Berlin, and everything's on the course, and it's your vest and t-shirt and your watch and shoes, that's it. But you start to move to these trails and you're bringing vests, you're having to bring your own jacket, you need a mobile phone, you need a maybe a flare, stuff like that. There's essential kit you have to bring. It's a completely different environment with which to test yourself. And the more I got into it, again, I have my eyes open. The uphill looks tough, and it is tough, but ultimately it's the downhill that you can really start to really burn your quads out and wreck yourself on. So the downhill technical trail, that whole technique is so important to hone as well. So for me, the doors that running opened up for me are amazing. You know, and I would recommend it to anybody, whether it's going to a park run and let that be it once a week. You know, a great community, a park run, and that's another thing that I got into. And Waterworks Park Run in Belfast is the one that I go to. Amazing community. A lot of the people who run today ran when it was first launched as the first park run in Northern Ireland in 2012. So for me, I think that's a big thing. If that gets people into it, great. If a marathon motivates people, great. And again, if people love the trail stuff or some sort of like other variation. But yeah, for me, it's continuing to do what I love to do, and also hopefully just spreading that to a few people, whether it be personal relationships I have or through YouTube.
Oh, that's great. You know, one of the reasons we are chatting here, because I came across your vlog that you did on Berlin Marathon, which is beautifully put together. And then it triggered my interest. Hey, I need to chat with Jason. What is he doing? But I'm hoping, and I'm sure it will, or if not already, inspiring people. As you say, the message is, if I can do it, maybe I can, and he or she can too, right?
Yes,
that's the message you're trying to spread.
It is.
And for your sub-4 Berlin or sub-4 marathon again, I do have full confidence that you'll get it, because you have done it. It's not that you have not done it.
Yeah, been there. Yeah.
Whatever the mind can believe, can achieve. I think you already proved it. You just have to recreate that momentum, that passion, or the drive to get that number or goal.
The discipline, right? Big discipline. That's it. Yeah.
I'm sure it's not that you have not done it. You have done it. Yeah. You just have to recreate the scenario, circumstances you did a couple of years later. That's a different variable too, right? Yeah. That's great. Thanks for sharing the next goals, a multitude of goals you're definitely chasing, and I can tell that you're definitely passionate about those goals as well. Now, you're trying to achieve these goals. I'm sure over the years, you built a sort of support system around you that helps you achieve those goals or go after those goals. I'm just curious, how does it look for Jason?
Yeah, so for me, I think something I probably haven't touched on so far is the realization of how important running is for my own mental health. I think a lot of these things came up during the pandemic when everyone was isolated, and the outlet for me, I say I was injured for some of the time, and I think that's what made it quite obvious that that in some ways running could be I wouldn't say crutch, that sounds sort of like it's required, but it really is a sense of relief, you know, from a day's work, from the stresses of everyday life. For me, it's always been my family, my parents that would be the support. They were actually with me in Berlin in 2018. Whenever I ran sub-4, my PB 351, they were there, and for me, they're a bit older. My father's in his 80s now, and so that was a chance to get them away somewhere that wasn't, you know what, again, too far away. And this all adds to, I suppose, as you say before, what makes Berlin so special, and being able to draw on that support from them. And them, even at that age, making their way around a few different points in the course to cheer me, to support, to get like a wee photo and video and that at the end was very inspiring, and their belief in me, because as I say, at that stage I was still living at home with them when I first started running, in 2010, the first marathon, and their kind of support of my lifestyle. So I wasn't drinking anymore, so I was obviously training. So when I came back, the simple things like having some food there, having some water, having an energy drink there for me, was just the support I needed to kind of push me out the door. Sometimes it was, you know, not great weather. They would always push me out the door. And a lot of friends as well. I say the friends I ran the relay marathon with were very supportive as well of doing the full marathon, checking in, how's it going, running with me at times as well. And I had a friend as well that ran that first marathon when we were doing the relay, and he introduced me to the running club. And again, the club again is a massive bit of support, because even through injuries, and injuries are some of, as I'm sure you know, the toughest periods we go through as runners, because you can put up with when you're on holiday and you don't want to run, or you just don't want to run for whatever reason. But when you really want to run, you've got an event and you can't, your body doesn't let you, it's a very, very, very tough thing, especially the first major injury you might get.
Yep.
Having people at the club to say, I've been there, here's what you do instead. So I had a really terrible propensity to just stop everything if I had an injury. And over the years, the support of the people in the club, you can go and do strength and conditioning, you can do swimming, you should do cycling, and here's how you do it. Here's how you do the same time, not the same distance, you do at this heart rate. And I think like-minded people and people who've been there, and having people who are also passionate about the thing you're passionate about, really helps. And I think that does mean that really helps at the club level. Or I suppose the other side of it is with my family, with my parents, they probably weren't that passionate about running, but obviously cared for me and so supported me in whatever endeavor I undertook for running. Even though a few times I definitely told them after, say, a 20-mile long run, I'd end up back at the door after 20 miles, collapse on the ground, and just tell them never to let me do this again, because it just feels at that time like just the worst idea ever. How can I do 6 more miles? But for me, it's having the right people around you. And I've been very, very lucky, I have to say, that throughout my running, I've just had the most supportive family, friends and girlfriend now as well. And her family, my current girlfriend's family, all run as well. They're part of a running club. They're very good runners in their own right as well. So the support comes naturally, and these are people who pass on their experiences, are very supportive. And again, a very small thing, even since I set the YouTube channel up, is the encouragement from that as well. Whether that be someone saying, well done on, as you say, the Berlin race vlog, or I ran a race in a coastal town we have this year, Larne, and I got a comment from a man who used to live in Larne 30 years ago, moved to Australia, but he still has family in Larne, and he was just saying how nice it was to see the sights, see what Larne looks like today through that vlog. And I just thought it's such a, when you reach someone that far away, and they might not care, but I don't know if he cares about running or not, but you just reach someone and make a difference to someone's life. And for me, if you can have a positive impact, and maybe I'm just getting older and stuff and being more reflective, but I think if you make a positive impact on someone's life, the way a lot of people have for me, I think as you get older, I start to reflect more on the fact that a lot of friends and family, I say my current partner as well, my current girlfriend, have been so supportive and so selfless with me in terms of supporting my running journey, that I think that a lot of people take it for granted. When I was younger, I might have done the same, but if you have the right people around you, it makes things a lot easier. You still have to go and do it, of course, but it makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you said it very well. One thing I'm curious, which you mentioned about the support, which I don't think it is extremely critical, but it's very rarely talked on, which is the mental health aspect, especially in the pandemic phase that we just went through, or the whole world went through. Can you deep dive a little bit more? Like, this is something probably that made you, make running a lifestyle, mostly because there's something you get out of it. Plus, you are in tech and you're in project management. So I myself being in tech, I know the pressure you have and on overall aspect of your life. Tell a little bit more about that. How does it look for you? I mean, what did you get out of on that front from a mental health perspective from running?
Yeah, for me, I don't know how long I've been needing running almost from a mental health perspective, but it became clear when I was injured for around 18 months during the pandemic of all times. And through I had a lot of personal upheaval, work upheaval, changing jobs and bits like that. And I was actually, for a period of time during that time, prescribed antidepressants by my GP, which is something that's fairly common. But for me, I never thought that would be something that would come my way or be required. And I'm, I used to feel ashamed talking about that. It's pretty common, so I'm comfortable with it now. But the only thing that really got me to the point where I felt they were no longer required was when I got back running. And so many, I see a lot of memes online about running being like an antidepressant, but I found it really is. For me, it's that, whether it's a sense of purpose, whether it's the endorphins you get from it, I'm not sure exactly what it is for me, but when I've when I'm able to go running, when I'm able to have that sort of structure, I think as well. As you say, when you have a stressful day at work, it's so tempting, I find, to open the laptop later at night to think about the day. You always have your phone in your hand, you're never switched off. So that sort of level of stress always stays at some level. I find you're just thinking about it, watching TV later on, you're sitting down. Whereas when you go out running, as I said before, I don't run with music or anything. So I just I just run. And so I can let the day's events play through my head unobstructed, without a phone to distract me, without YouTube to distract me, without TV, without having to do things around the house. I'm just running. I'm doing something I love. The blood's coming around the body. And there's bound to be so much more physiologically than I actually understand that happens when you get oxygenated blood through the body, endorphins, stuff like that. Maybe it triggers dopamine, but there's just something that I never finish a run wishing I hadn't gone out and ran. There are days like today where it's very difficult to get out the door. It's windy, it's wet. Yeah. That's the hard part, getting out the door. Once you get out, and then once you come home, you never think, I wish I hadn't done that. You're always happier for it. And there's just something for me that when I come back, I'm so much calmer. And part of the way I've actually measured that is with these new garments we have, new watches, and the stress during the day, I can see it go up and down with work, up and down. And then when I come back from a run, for the hour or two after I run, when I finish, the stress is low. It's in the blue. It's not the orange and red. It's down in the blue. And so there's something about running that calms me. And I don't know exactly what it is sort of physiologically, but it works for me. And I only really realized it when I couldn't do it, when I was injured and missed it. And so again, I think it's a big thing. And it was actually brought up, I think, in Northern Ireland here, or certainly in the UK, about GPs potentially prescribing that sort of community-led exercise for people, especially after the pandemic, who maybe weren't, or maybe were a bit detached, a bit lonely and stuff like that, to get not just to exercise, but exercise with people in the community. And so I think that was a big thing that was missed as well, especially for people like myself. I say at the time of the pandemic, I lived alone. And so that there was proper isolation there. And I now have a dog, so that's okay. But it's getting out to run. It's hard to describe when you get to run. A lot of your worries, a lot of the day's worries just melt away. And again, I'm not sure exactly what sort of neurological processes take place, but whatever it is, it genuinely benefits me massively. And I think that's another thing that if I can, I'm not sure if I articulate that well, but if I can to someone else and it does help someone else, then that's part of the aim I have going forward.
Yeah, no, that's great. Were you running with music before you switched over without?
Yeah, I actually started when I first started training for that first marathon in 2010. I ran with music, and back then we didn't have Spotify. I'm starting to know now. We had an iPod stuck to your arm and wired headphones, and I had a pair of sort of quite cheap sport wired headphones, and I wore them for the first 3 or 4 weeks of marathon training as I built up 6 miles, 7 miles, 8 miles, and when I got to the 10-mile mark, it was just too much of a distraction. It was just too much of a, you were getting sweat in this ear. It was sort of bouncing about a bit. It was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And again, it was probably just me realizing that at the start, I thought I was distracting myself from running. I thought that's what I wanted to do, was just detach from it. And looking back, I think that 10-mile run was me realizing that I actually liked the act of running. I wanted to be tuned into running. And I think that's what that was. So that was the last time I ever ran with music. I hear different people have different things. My girlfriend, to be fair, loves music. She doesn't like to hear herself breathing when she's running, sort of thing. And people do have their different motivations, and that's fine. But for me, that was probably when I realized I had a love for the actual act of running, as opposed to just thinking this is a training run. It's like work. I have to do it, and music distracts me. That's when I sort of realized, no, I need to, I like being in tune with my body, in tune with how I'm feeling during the run.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is different for everyone. They have figured out like, okay, what works for me. Let's continue to that. For sure. Yeah, I think there is a word, I'm not sure how common that is. It's called naked running. So basically, you're not distracting yourself from the active learning pace that you're saying, that at least you can sense what's going around you. Like you feel your heartbeat, you feel your, own feet, hitting the road. the bird chirping or
That's
the
it,
car beeping or whatever it is. It's like you hear all your senses. Otherwise, you can say I can be productive. I can do listen to a podcast or something, music. I'm doing two things in parallel, but may I miss out those active component of running. But again, best thing is figuring out what works for you, and
what works for you. Absolutely.
Let's continue with that. Well, it is lovely chatting with you, Jason. I all the best for joining the Jubilee Club, I'm sure, and also for your sub-4 next marathon. And I wish that it happens before your 10th Berlin, or on the 10th Berlin. I'm sure you'll figure it out. But it was great chatting with you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me on. I'll be sure to follow on along the podcast. I love what you're doing with the podcasts, and very inspiring. The more I can listen to about Berlin, the better. So thanks for having me on, and take care.